Okay, welcome to task number 3, Geometry and Lines. So this is probably one of the most important tasks that you will do because it is the fundamental building block of pretty much everything else in SketchUp. That being said, there are a few things I'd like to go over first. So we've got some definitions in this task section: line, face, circle, surface, group, component, guideline, and dimensions. So the reason I wanted to touch on these is that our lines are our fundamental, smallest, most irreducible part. They can't get any smaller. There's no other fundamental building block, really. You could go down to a point, but a point is just a place in space. So a line builds into pretty much everything else, be it a square that is then extruded, which is a really important word in CAD, and we'll get into that when we talk about squares and then push and pull. But the thing is that lines build into everything else. So the vocabulary that we need to really master here is the line. It's a connection of 2 points, essentially. They create edges, and they are straight. There's no real deviation from that. So you connect a series of lines, and they create what we call a face. So let's do that real quick. So first off, there is the freehand tool, but that's not what we're working with right now. We're working with straight lines. So talking about how a line works. So there are a couple different things. First off, you have to root that line somewhere. I chose to root that in our green-red plane, or a red-green plane, which is also our XY plane. We'll talk about that in the next section a little bit. And there's some really good information in task 4 about it. You can see that I can create a line that is green, and the reason for that is it is parallel to the green or y-axis. Same thing over here, parallel to the red or x-axis, and then parallel to the blue or z-axis. I can just freehand that, and if you look down in the lower right-hand corner right here, this is telling me how long the line I am currently drawing is. So if I go 24 foot on that one, I'm going to bring it down here a little bit so it's not quite as. So 24 foot, and don't forget, foot is designated by the apostrophe, and then inches are designated by the quotation marks. So 24 foot, I hit enter. That is a 24 foot long line from here to here. If I go across, and you see how my endpoint activates here, and I can also get a line that will indicate that I am perpendicular, because right now I'm starting to track below this plane. But staying in that plane, if I click here, I create a surface, and that's our next definition. Or excuse me, a face. This is a face. Multiple faces build into a surface, and that's what our eventual, if we were to create a multi-sided polygon that is extruded here. So that face is an enclosed series of lines, and you can see how that transition, how quickly that happens. So as long as you do that, you have a face, and that, as I said, builds into a surface. And then we can talk about groups and components later on, but I want you to be aware that they exist, and basically what they are different ways of designating all those lines and how they build up eventually. I also was talking about guidelines and dimensions. Those will also come in later units, but I want you to be aware of them now, because when we are dimensioning things eventually, it's an important thing to know. So I'm going to build a cuboid. I'm not going to measure it. I just want you to see how we're going to build this. So first one, parallel to the green axis there. This one we're going to keep parallel to the red. Come over, still parallel to green, and I should eventually, coming down here, pop up a dotted line right there. I want to get back down into the plane I want to be in. It takes a second sometimes. There we go. So this line is parallel to this line. because this line is also parallel to this line is also parallel to this line. I think I said that right. But long story short is it's using the properties that we learn in geometry to actively create in SketchUp. So if we go we want this line to be parallel to here and here. If we just close it in, it should be. We create our first face. And the next thing is, we want to be creating in 3 dimensions. We all know what a cube or a cuboid looks like, but the best way to do it, and we want to ensure that it actually is, all of our corners are 90 degrees in all directions. So we go up. We know that this, so we created on this plane right here. We know that this axis is vertical, or 90 degrees to that plane. So if we go right there, we know that this line is also perpendicular to this plane, which is parallel to which this face resides on this plane, and around we go. I'm going to hit escape because each time I'm going to create a line that is independent and not continuous like we were doing when I first showed you. So I'm going to hit escape again. You see how blue, and then I'm looking for that dotted line. That one's a little bit faint. I hope you were able to see it. Escape, and then blue, and there we go. Okay, so I've got 4 vertical lines. They should each be perpendicular to the corner here. They should all be the same height because we used that dotted guide line. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start filling stuff in here. So we're going to make, so this line here, this line here, this line here, it looks very much like what we had when we were creating this face right here before we put this final line in. So if I come across here, there we go, we get a face. If I come from here to here, we get another face. We go from here to here, we get our final face before we close the entire thing in. And finally, if I go from here to here, I go from a bunch of we are moving to the 3rd dimension, but reality is that this now is a 3-dimensional object. Before it was not. So this is not the easiest way to build this. We could have done it in a different manner, using a square and what will eventually be our push-pull tool down here. But the reason that we start here is seeing how that these are the fundamental building blocks in SketchUp, and how even when you use other more sophisticated tools, these are still really important. So with that said, we went through the different definitions pretty quickly. There's also circle, which I think I breezed over. But all those different things are what we use to build the geometry in SketchUp. And our lines are our smallest part of that. And then how that is then grouped, or multiple components are built into a large object, or structure like a house. So if you think about all these, how you draw all these individual things and then bring them all together to build a massive thing. That's how this that's where that all starts, is right here with lines. That being said, this was task number 3, geometry and lines, and that's all I've got for you for this module. I will talk to you next time.